Welcome to the Maybe Not So Great Books channel. You decide. This is lesson 3 of 14. Price controls, same cause, same effect every time, from Basic Economics, a common sense guide to the economy, 5th edition, by Thomas Sowell. Name a city with rent control that does not have a housing shortage. Take your time. I'm waiting.
You are going to be waiting a very, very long time.
Because there isn't one.
Because there isn't one. And, that silence right there, that's probably the loudest data point in this whole discussion. It tells you everything.
It really sets the stage. So in our last deep dive, we talked about prices as information, how they work when everything is, running smoothly.
Exactly. We talked about the healthy physiology of an economy, how prices are these little messengers coordinating everything from, coffee beans to computer chips. It was all about what prices do.
The internet before the internet, I think we called.
That's the one. But today is different. We're leaving the healthy patient behind, and we're heading straight to the economic trauma ward.
Okay, so we're looking at what happens when you stop those messengers, when you essentially gag them.
You gag them, you blindfold them, you break the signal. And that brings us to the mission for today's deep dive: price controls.
Right. And so Wells' argument is that it doesn't matter if you're trying to push prices down or prop them up.
It makes no difference. Whether it's a price ceiling, trying to keep things cheap, or a price floor, trying to keep things expensive,
Yeah.
they produce the exact same kinds of disasters.
And you're using the word disasters very deliberately.
Oh, absolutely. This isn't academic jargon like market inefficiencies or allocation friction. We are talking about literally people starving in cities that were once full of food. We're talking about buildings crumbling to dust in the middle of the wealthiest cities on the planet.
And the really wild part, and this is the core of Sowell's thesis in this lesson, is that it happens every single time. It doesn't matter what the culture is, what the era is, what the political system is.
Doesn't matter at all.
Well,
Ancient Rome putting a cap on wheat prices, you get a shortage. 16th century Belgium trying to control the price of bread during a siege, you get a shortage. Modern New York City with rent control.
shortage.
And 21st century Zimbabwe. Same story. It's the closest thing economics has to a law of physics. It's like gravity.
How so?
Well, you drop a ball, it falls. It doesn't matter if you're a king in London or a peasant in Lima, gravity just works. Price controls are the same. You push a price below what people are willing to pay for it, you will get a shortage. Every single time.
And we've got quite a trip through history today to prove that point. We're going to touch on the San Francisco earthquake of 1906. We're going to go to modern Zimbabwe, and even a military siege from the 1500s.
But let's start with something a little closer to home for a lot of people: housing.
Literally where we live.
Let's talk about the roof over your head.
Okay, so Sowell kicks this off with a brilliant comparison. A tale of two cities. He uses it to explain the difference between what he calls a physical scarcity and an economic shortage. We've got San Francisco in 1906 and modern-day New York City.
Right. And before we dive in, it's worth pausing on that distinction because it's not intuitive.
No, it's not. I think most people, myself included, if you hear housing shortage, you just assume it's a physical problem. Like, we just don't have enough houses for the number of people.
That's the common sense assumption, right?
Yeah.
It feels like a game of musical chairs where there just aren't enough chairs. Simple math. Too many people, not enough apartments.
But Sowell says, hold on a second, it's not that simple.
Not at all. He says a shortage is an economic phenomenon, not necessarily a physical one. And his laboratory for this experiment is San Francisco post-earthquake. It's perfect because it strips away all the other political noise. Just a pure natural disaster.
So paint the picture for us. 1906, the big one hits San Francisco.
It's an almost unimaginable level of destruction. It wasn't just the quake itself, which was massive. It was the fires that broke out afterwards. They burned for days.
Total devastation.
Total. When the smoke finally cleared, more than half of the city's entire housing stock was just gone. Wiped off the map. Piles of ash and rubble.
Okay, so let's use that musical chairs logic. You've got roughly the same number of people, maybe even more with relief workers coming in, but you've just yanked away half the chairs.
By that logic, you should have a catastrophic housing shortage.
Yeah.
Half the population should be sleeping on the streets, right?
That would be the expectation. A humanitarian crisis of homelessness.
That's what a physical shortage model would predict. But here's the stunner. The San Francisco Chronicle, the paper on the ground at the time, reported shortly after the quake that there was no housing shortage.
Wait, how is that even possible? You can't just magic new houses into existence. Half of them are gone. The math doesn't add up.
You can't magic the houses back. No. but you can instantly change how people use the houses that are left. And the reason there was no shortage, and by shortage we mean people who were willing and able to pay for housing but couldn't find any at any price, was because prices were allowed to do their job.
So the city government didn't step in. They didn't say, okay, emergency, we're freezing all rents.
They just let it rip. They let prices do what prices do when supply gets cut in half and demand stays the same.
They skyrocketed.
To the moon.
Okay, let's stop right there because I can hear people listening to this and just recoiling. That sounds monstrous. Your house just burned down, you've lost everything, and some landlord with a standing apartment is now charging you 5 times the rent. That feels like the definition of price gouging.
It feels incredibly cool. And Sowell is not a monster. He doesn't deny that emotional reaction. But he forces us to do what we're here to do, which is to look at the stage 2 consequences. Compare the consequences of that high price versus the alternative.
The good intentions alternative of tapping the price.
Exactly. So what did that sky-high price actually do? It sent a massive citywide signal, a scream, really, and it forced thousands of people to change their behavior in ways that a government committee couldn't have planned in a century.
Okay, walk me through it. Stage 1 thinking is that landlord is a greedy jerk. What's the stage 2 effect of that greed?
Stage 2 is the magic of adaptation. First, look at the supply side. Think about the people whose houses didn't burn down. Maybe you're an elderly couple in a big 4-bedroom Victorian. Before the quake, the kids are gone. You use the spare rooms for sewing, for storage. You like your peace and quiet.
Makes sense.
But now suddenly the rent you can get for those spare rooms isn't just a little extra cash, it's a fortune.
Yeah.
The price becomes so high that it overcomes your preference for privacy.
So the high price is basically a giant bribe to open your doors?
Yeah. It's a bribe to use your space more efficiently. You look at that empty room and you don't see a sewing room anymore. You see enough money to retire a year early.
Yeah.
You put 3 people in there. If the rent had been capped at the pre-quake level, you'd have said, no thanks, not worth the hassle. But at this new price, welcome, come on in.
So the existing housing stock immediately gets denser. Every spare room, every attic, every basement gets filled.
Precisely. The supply of livable space expands dramatically, even though the number of buildings shrank. Now think about the demand side. What signal does that high price send to people who don't absolutely need to be in the city?
It says get out.
It screams it.
Yeah.
If you have family over in Oakland, or you're retired and could live anywhere, you look at those rents and say, you know what, I'm going to go visit my sister for 6 months. You voluntarily leave, which frees up another apartment.
So it creates this self-sorting mechanism. The people who need to be there the most, the construction workers, the engineers, the doctors rebuilding the city, they're the ones willing to pay the premium.
Or their employers are. And that leads to the most important part, the signal to the builders.
Right. What are they doing?
If rents are that high, the profit for building a new apartment is astronomical. So are you taking weekends off? No, you're running 3 shifts, 2147. You're paying extra to get lumber shipped in from Oregon by express train. The high price acts like a giant magnet, pulling resources from all over the country and concentrating them on rebuilding San Francisco as fast as humanly possible.
So the result is you have immediate allocation of all the existing space and a maximum speed incentive to create new space.
Exactly. Everyone found a roof. It might have been a crowded roof, and it was definitely an expensive roof for a while. But there were no empty rooms in 1906 San Francisco. The resource was physically scarce, but there was no economic shortage.
Okay. Now, let's flip the coin. Let's go to New York City.
The contrast could not be more stark. New York City hasn't had half the city burned down, no massive earthquake. For long stretches, the ratio of housing units to people has been pretty stable. Physically speaking, there are plenty of chairs for the people.
And yet, New York is famous for its chronic, permanent housing shortage. It's the central crisis of the city. People are on waiting lists for a decade. You hear these stories of people literally checking the obituaries to find an apartment.
And this is the perfect example of an economic shortage. Why? Because for decades, New York has had some form of rent control or rent stabilization. The government has put a ceiling on the price.
And let's be fair, the intention is good. I mean, the goal is noble. You want to keep housing affordable. You want to protect people from being priced out of their homes.
The intention is always noble. But as Sowell says again and again, intentions are irrelevant. Only consequences matter. And when you cap the price, you kill the signal. You put a blindfold on the entire market.
So in San Francisco, the high price screamed, build more and share your space. What does the legally capped low price in New York whisper to people?
It whispers, don't bother. Let's start with the builders again. If the government says you can only charge, say, $1,500 a month for a new apartment, but it costs you $1,800 a month in mortgage, taxes, and maintenance to have that apartment, are you going to build it?
Of course not. That's just setting money on fire. I'd go build an office building or a luxury condo in a different city where I can actually make a return.
Precisely. So the supply of new, affordable housing just dries up. But it gets so much worse than that. So Garl points to a statistic that, frankly, it should be on a billboard in every city considering rent control. He says that in New York City, there are estimated to be 4 times as many abandoned, boarded-up housing units as there are homeless people.
Okay, stop. Say that again. 4 times as many empty apartments as people sleeping on the street.
4 times.
That feels like that can't be right. That's a paradox. If there's a desperate shortage of housing, why would anyone just abandon a building in New York City? It's prime real estate.
It's the ultimate tragic irony of price controls. You have to do the math from the landlord's perspective. You own a building, okay, you have costs, you have to pay property taxes, you have to pay for heat, for water, for repairs.
And those costs are not price controlled. The plumber charges you the market rate. The oil company charges you the market rate. The city's tax assessor definitely charges you the market rate.
So your costs are rising every year with inflation. But your income, the rent, is legally frozen or capped at a tiny increase.
So eventually, the lines cross on the graph.
Big cross. And you reach a point where the money you collect in rent is less than the money you have to pay out just to keep the building from falling down. At that moment, the building stops being an asset and becomes a liability. It is actively costing you money every month to own it.
So what do? You can't just sell it, because who would buy a money-losing business?
Exactly. So first, you cut back on maintenance. That's the quality deterioration that Sowell talks about. The paint starts to peel. The leaky faucet stays leaky. The boiler breaks and you patch it instead of replacing it. The building begins to decay.
And the tenants are living in worse and worse conditions.
But they don't leave. Because the rent is so cheap, it's the best deal in town. So they stay. And eventually the building is in such bad shape that the city orders you to make major repairs that will cost tens of thousands of dollars.
But you're already losing money every month.
So you do the math, and it's cheaper to just walk away, board up the windows, stop paying taxes, and let the city take it in a few years. That is how you get an abandoned building in the middle of a housing crisis. The policy designed to provide affordable housing literally destroyed the housing.
It's just staggering. It creates this bizarre incentive to hoard space, too.
Oh, completely the opposite of San Francisco. In San Francisco, the high price made people get roommates. In New York, the low price makes you hold on to space you don't need.
Right. If you've got a rent-controlled 3-bedroom apartment for $800 a month and your kids grow up and move out, are you going to downsize to a 1-bedroom that costs $2,500 on the open market?
Never. You keep that huge apartment for yourself. You turn the extra bedrooms into a home office, a gym, storage. It's too good a deal to ever give up.
Yeah.
So you have one person occupying space for a family of 4, while that family is crammed into a tiny studio somewhere else. The allocation is completely broken.
This is a perfect transition to the next big question. Who actually wins in this system? Because the political sales pitch is always, we're doing this to help the poor.
Always. We're protecting the vulnerable from greedy landlords. But what Sowell shows is that when you get rid of price competition, you just replace it with something else. You get non-price competition.
Unpack that for us. Price competition is simple. Highest bidder gets the apartment. What's non-price competition?
Okay, so imagine you're a landlord in New York with one rent-controlled vacancy. The legal rent is, say, $1,000 a month, but the market value is $3,000. So when you put an ad up, do you get one applicant?
No, you get 1,000. Your phone melts.
You get 1,000 applicants. Now, you're legally forbidden from raising the price. You can't use money to decide. So how do you choose? Who gets this golden ticket?
I guess I pick the person who seems like the best tenant, the least likely to cause problems.
Exactly. You become incredibly selective. You start looking for other signals of quality. Who has the 800 credit score? Who has the stable job at a big law firm? Who has no pets, no kids?
And this is where it can get really ugly.
It gets very ugly, very fast. Because in a free market, discrimination is expensive. If a landlord is, say, a racist, and he refuses to rent to a perfectly qualified person of color, that apartment sits empty while he looks for someone else. He loses a month's rent. The market imposes a financial penalty on his bigotry.
But with rent control.
There are 999 other applicants lined up behind that person. It costs the landlord nothing to indulge his worst prejudices. He can discriminate based on race, religion, family status, you name it, with zero economic consequence.
So who gets the apartments? It's not the poor single mother with a spotty employment history. It's not the new immigrant family.
It's the safe tenant, the well-off, well-connected, stable professional. And Sowell has this one example from the book that it's infuriating. He talks about a case in New York where a U.S. congressman's family was living in a rent-controlled apartment.
I remember this part. It wasn't just some studio.
No, it was a 5-bedroom apartment.
5 bedrooms in Manhattan.
But with a solarium and 2 terraces. I mean, it's basically a palace.
The market rent on that must have been astronomical.
Sowell estimated it at over $5,000 a month. And this was a while ago. Do you want to guess what they were paying under rent control?
I'm afraid to ask.
Around $350 a month.
You're kidding me. $350 for a mansion in the sky.
Less than most people's car payment. And here's the other side of that coin. At the very same time, the city of New York was spending over $3,000 a month of taxpayer money to house a single homeless family in a squalid, dangerous welfare hotel.
Because there were no apartments available for them. That is the whole system in a nutshell. A massive subsidy for the wealthy and connected, paid for by everyone else, that locks the poor out completely.
It's what you could call the rich tenant paradox. Rent control ends up being a subsidy for the people who are already inside the system, who are often older and more affluent, at the direct expense of the outsiders trying to get in: the young, the poor, the new arrivals.
It's an economic wall disguised as a helping hand.
And that's before you even get to the black market stuff like key money. The landlord can't charge you more rent, but he can charge you a $10,000 non-refundable fee for the furniture.
So the poor get shut out again because they don't have 10 grand in cash for the under-the-table bread.
That's a rigged game from top to bottom.
Okay, so that's housing. It's a disaster, but it's a slow-motion disaster. Let's raise the stakes. Let's talk about something where the consequences are immediate. Let's talk about food.
This is where price controls go from being merely destructive to being potentially civilization-ending. And for this, Sowell takes us to a very modern example. Zimbabwe in 2007.
Not ancient history. This was just over a decade ago. What was the situation there?
Zimbabwe was in the grip of hyperinflation. The government was just printing money nonstop, and so prices were doubling every few days, then every few hours. It was complete economic chaos.
And the government's solution?
Stage 1, thinking it its most pure. Problem: prices are too high. Solution: make high prices illegal. They literally called it Operation Reduce Prices.
Simple enough.
The government ordered every shopkeeper in the country to cut all their prices in half or even more, and they sent the police out to enforce it.
Okay, so imagine you're a regular person in Zimbabwe that day. You wake up, and suddenly the price of bread, sugar, milk, everything is 50% off.
It's a party. The initial reaction was absolute euphoria. People flooded the stores. They bought everything they could get their hands on, whether he needed it or not. I mean, if you see a brand new TV for what amounts to $10, you buy it.
So for the first 24 hours, the government looks like heroes. We've defeated inflation. We've made food affordable for the people.
And then the hangover. And it was a brutal one.
Let's look at it from the shopkeeper's perspective. The mob has cleared my shelves. I'm left with a pile of cash that is now worth even less than it was yesterday, and it's half of what I paid my supplier for the goods in the first place.
You've just been forced to sell your entire inventory at a massive loss. So the next morning, are you calling your supplier to reorder?
No way. I'm bankrupt. For every loaf of bread I sold, I lost money. The more I sold, the faster I went broke. I'd lock the doors and go home.
And so did every other shopkeeper. And the suppliers, the bakers, the farmers, they're facing the exact same math. They can't afford to produce food if the government is going to force them to sell it for less than the cost of flour and fertilizer. It's not a political strike, it's just math.
When the price doesn't cover the cost, the supply chain just stops.
It evaporates.
Huh?
And Sowell includes this absolutely bone-chilling quote from the New York Times, written just 1 month after the price cuts.
What does it say?
It said, "Bread, sugar, and cornmeal, staples of every Zimbabwean's diet, have vanished, seized by mobs who denuded stores like locusts in wheat fields."
Like locusts. Wow.
The entire economy just seized up. People were starving, not because there was a drought, not because the farmers forgot how to farm. They were starving because the economic mechanism for getting food from the farm to the city had been outlawed.
It's just stunning how fast it happened. 1 month from everything's on sale to there's nothing to buy at any price.
That's the terrifying speed of a systemic collapse. And Sowell shows this isn't a new phenomenon. He goes all the way back to the Siege of Antwerp in the 1500s to show the exact same principle at work.
Okay, so time travel with me. 16th century Belgium. The Spanish army has the city of Antwerp surrounded. A classic siege.
Nothing gets in, nothing gets out. Food inside the city walls becomes incredibly scarce.
Yeah.
And as you'd expect, the price of what's left is going through the roof.
Again, feels like gouging. People are starving, and merchants are charging a fortune for a crust of bread.
It feels awful. But there was a group of people responding to that high price. Smugglers.
The unlikely heroes of the story.
Economically speaking, yes. These guys were risking their lives running the Spanish blockade at night to sneak food into the city. Why? For charity.
Not a chance. For the money.
For the money. The high prices were the hazard pay that made it worthwhile to risk getting caught and executed. They were the city's lifeline.
But the city authorities, I'm guessing, didn't see it that way.
No, they saw angry citizens and high prices. So, with the best of intentions, they passed a law. They put a price ceiling on food to stop the gouging.
And the smugglers?
The smugglers looked at the new legally mandated low price and said, you know what? It's not worth getting shot for that. The risk was the same, but the reward had vanished.
So the lifeline was cut.
The lifeline was cut. The new supply of food dropped to zero. What happened inside the city? Well, now that bread was artificially cheap again, people started consuming more of it. They weren't rationing it as carefully.
Sowell has that great quote. The city lived in high spirits until all at once provisions gave out.
And the final result? Antwerp surrendered.
They lost the war. They were defeated not by Spanish cannons, but by a price control law.
It's an unbelievable lesson. We hate high prices in a crisis, but they serve two life-saving functions. They force us to ration what we have, and they create a powerful incentive for new supply to appear. If you kill the price, you kill both of those functions, and you starve.
So we've covered price ceilings, trying to keep prices low. They create shortages, but you said the other side of the coin, price floors, is just as bad.
It is. A price floor is when the government sets a minimum price for something, usually to help producers. The classic example is agriculture. The government says you cannot sell wheat for less than $5 a bushel, even if the market clearing price is only $3.
Okay, so let's run the simulation. I'm a farmer. The government guarantees me a high price. What's my incentive?
Your incentive is to plant wheat in every square inch of land you own. You buy more fertilizer, a new tractor. You produce as much as you possibly can because the price signal is sending you a false message that the world is desperate for your wheat.
And on the other side, as a consumer, if the price of bread and pasta is artificially high because of that wheat price,
you buy less of it. You eat more potatoes. You switch to rice. You economize.
So farmers are producing more and consumers are buying less.
And what do you get when supply outstrips demand?
A surplus. A giant mountain of unsold stuff.
A massive, wasteful surplus. And Sowell gives these examples that are just, they're tragic. The most heartbreaking is from the Great Depression in the United States.
What happened?
The government was trying to prop up pork prices to help farmers. So the Agricultural Adjustment Administration went out and bought 6 million hogs from farmers.
6 million pigs.
6 million healthy animals. And then they destroyed them, slaughtered them and let the meat go to waste, buried them in pits.
And this was happening during the Great Depression, when we've all seen the photos of breadlines of children suffering from malnutrition.
That is the horror of it. On one side of the country, you have people starving. On the other, you have the government systematically destroying food, all to maintain an artificial number in a ledger.
The good intention of helping the farmer led to the evil outcome of wasting food while children went hungry.
And it's the same story in other places. He talks about India, where government price supports for wheat created these huge stockpiles in government warehouses. And the warehouses were so mismanaged.
It just rotted.
It got eaten by rats. While in other parts of India, people were starving. But they couldn't get the wheat because the price floor made it too expensive to buy, and the bureaucracy couldn't manage to just give it away. The surplus rotted while the people starved.
So a price ceiling makes things disappear, and a price floor makes them rot.
That's a perfect summary. Either way, the resource is wasted and people suffer. He even points to the European Union's agricultural subsidies, which created the infamous butter mountains and wine lakes.
Literally lakes of unwanted wine.
So much surplus wine, they didn't know what to do with it. And what's worse is how they got rid of it. They would dump it on the world market at a super low price.
Which sounds like a good deal for, say, a developing country.
For a minute. But imagine you're a small dairy farmer in Africa trying to make a living, and suddenly your local market is flooded with ultra-cheap European butter subsidized by their taxpayers. You can't compete, you go out of business.
So the price floor in Europe created poverty in Africa. My gosh.
The distortions ripple out everywhere.
Okay, so this brings us to the big, frustrating question. The evidence is overwhelming. From Rome to New York to Zimbabwe, the pattern is crystal clear. So why do we keep doing this?
That really is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
If the results are so predictably disastrous, why do politicians keep proposing price controls, and why do voters keep falling for it?
I mean, I have to admit, even after this conversation, if my landlord told me my rent was doubling next month, my gut reaction would be to support a rent freeze. The emotional pull is so strong.
And that's exactly why it persists, because the benefits of price controls are all stage 1 benefits. They're immediate, they're concentrated, and they're highly visible. You see that your rent didn't go up today. The politician gets to hold a press conference and be the hero who fought for affordability.
And the disaster, the stage 2 consequence.
That comes later. It's delayed. It's dispersed among a lot of people. The housing shortage gets a little worse each year. The building decays slowly. And when the bad stuff finally happens, it's easy to blame it on something else.
Right. When the building is finally abandoned, nobody says, this is the inevitable result of the 1997 Rent Stabilization Act. They say, look at that greedy slumlord.
Exactly. It's emotionally satisfying. It feels good to blame a villain. It's much harder and less satisfying to understand the complex, systemic consequences of a well-intentioned policy. As Sowell says, economic fallacies survive because they are politically useful.
A politician who says, we need to let rents rise to encourage more housing construction sounds like a heartless ghoul.
While the one who says, I will punish greedy landlords and make housing a right, sounds like a champion of the people, even if his policies ultimately destroy the housing supply.
So let's play devil's advocate. Is there ever a case for it? Sowell seems to be an absolutist on this. But what about a true national emergency, like a war?
That's the go-to counterexample. During World War II, both the US and the UK had price controls and rationing, and society didn't collapse. We won the war.
Well, it worked.
Well, it's different. It's crucial to note that it wasn't just price controls. It was price controls plus rationing. You couldn't just buy all the cheap sugar you wanted. You had a coupon that only let you buy £1 per month.
So that prevents the hoarding and the locusts in the wheat fields.
It does. It manages the demand side. But even then, Sowell would point out that black markets flourished instantly. People were trading coupons, paying extra under the table, the economic pressures were still there, and it was understood to be a temporary emergency measure. The danger is when you make the temporary permanent.
What about the modern, softer versions? People will say, we're not talking about a hard price freeze. We're talking about rent stabilization, just limiting increases to, say, 3% a year.
That's the common argument today. And it's true, it is less dramatic than the Zimbabwe approach. But Sowell would argue the mechanism is identical, it's just in slow motion. If general inflation is running at 5% and you cap rent increases at 3%, then every single year, the landlord's real income is falling by 2%.
So you still eventually hit that tipping point where the building becomes a money-losing liability?
You still get there, it just might take 20 years instead of 2. The decay is slower, the shortage accumulates more gradually, but the final destination is the same abandoned building.
And I suppose we just have to acknowledge the raw politics of it. Economically, letting the price of bottled water go to $20 a case after a hurricane is the fastest way to get more water trucked into the disaster zone.
It is absolutely the most efficient signal.
But politically, it's suicide. No mayor could ever defend that. They'd be run out of office on a rail.
And that's the fundamental tension. Economics is about the efficient allocation of scarce resources. Politics is about the allocation of power and public approval. And what is economically sound is very often politically toxic.
So, wrapping this all up, what's the one big lesson you want people to take away from this?
I think it's that you cannot repeal the law of supply and demand by passing a law in Congress or City Hall. You can't vote to repeal gravity.
You can only ignore it.
You can ignore it, and you can distort its effects for a while. But when you outlaw prices from doing their job, you don't magically solve the problem of scarcity. You don't create more housing or more food. You just change how that scarce good gets distributed.
Instead of being distributed to whoever is willing to pay the most.
It gets distributed to whoever is willing to wait in line the longest, or whoever has a cousin on the city council, or whoever's the right race or social class, or whoever got here first. and is now pulling up the ladder behind them.
You're trading an economic allocation system for a political one.
And Sowell's lifelong argument is that the political system is almost always a clumsier, less efficient, and ultimately less fair way to allocate things than the price system for all of its imperfections.
It really is a powerful, if sometimes uncomfortable, way to look at the world. When you hear a politician promise something for cheap, the first question should always be, where's the shortage?
Because it's coming. It's always coming.
That was lesson 3 of 14 on Basic Economics, a common sense guide to the economy, 5th edition. Subscribe for the full series. If you haven't seen our debate overview of the whole book, check that out, link in the description. Thanks for being here. See you next time.